Good morning. Today is November 29th, 2024. This is Lisa, Awkward Quilter GA, and you are getting a opportunity to see the backside of my sewing station. So generally when I'm on live, um, you see my sewing machine and my design wall. Well, this is the backside of my sewing room. I have my cutting table here. This is where I lay out my fabric, and it is also where I sandwich my quilts. It's a small space, but it works for me. I have some of my stash. I have stash all over. I have stash underneath the tables. I do utilize two husky tables, and they are adjustable. They go up and down. They were relatively affordable, about $250. And one of the things that I like the reason why I like them so much is because when I'm cutting or when I'm sandwiching my quilts, I can raise and lower it. But I have a few goals for 2025, and it's just right around the corner. We had Thanksgiving yesterday. I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. But I have a few goals, and that is to utilize all my stash. I want to freshen it up by the end of next year, but in order to freshen it up and to be a good servant of all the blessings that I have and have received, I want to be a little more effective in how I utilize those fabrics and what I make. And so I'm focusing on more smaller projects. There may be one or two big quilts in 2025, but I am going to focus on smaller quilts and then being a little bit more creative. This video is actually going to teach you how to make a very, very easy beginner friendly pieced quilt. Um, it's very simple, and I will be giving you cutting instructions. You can pause whenever you want, and we are going to get started. So give me a second. This is raw video. There is not going to be editing, just maybe a pause here and there. So, welcome again. We are going to get ready to make a very easy beginner friendly baby quilt. Now, you can size this quilt up by making additional blocks if you want to make it bigger. But it's going to measure about 35-inch square when we're completed. What you will need something to write on and a pen. And I'm just going to set that aside. You'll need your standard equipment, which is your sewing machine and your thread and whatever. But you will need a rotary cutter. If you want to mark it, you will need some way to mark your fabrics, or to name your fabrics. I'm using a 12.5-inch Creative Grids ruler. You can use the 12.5-inch if you have it of your choice. And you will need 18 10-inch squares. So this is actually part of a mini layer cake, and it was a layer cake, a junior layer cake that I received in the Fat Quarter Shops sampler box several years ago, 1 or 2 years ago. I do not remember, but you will need 18. Now, in this junior layer cake, it came with 20, and I did press it out because I've had it for a while rolled up. I did not make the pattern that was in the sew sampler, but I've been hoarding the fabric. And as I said, I want to be a little bit better in utilizing some of my fabric. So anyway, this is a really pretty line. It is by Moda by Camille Ross Kelly, and it was Nantucket Summer. And again, there is 20 in this junior layer cake. And the first thing I'm going to do is pull out 2 of the 18 or the 10-inch squares because we will only need 18. And I'm just going to set that aside for now. Okay. Again, this is very, very simple. And what I've pretty much decided to do is kind of pull from the back and pull from the front. For the first set, I want 4 squares, and you can mix it up, and this is such a pretty line. So I'm going to have 4 squares, and we're just kind of setting this up. Let's get this white in there. If you want to mark it, to remember that this is A, so there's 4 squares in here, and I'm going to set that aside. For the next one, I am going to choose 6 10-inch. That's pretty. So 6, and you want a variation of color. One of the great things about layer cakes is that you get a taste of everything in the line. So that's 4. Let's go ahead and put that in there, 5. And make sure there's no duplicates. And I'm going to stick that cherry in there. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Go ahead and put that on the side. And what you should have remaining is 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Go on and put it towards the, mix it around a little. So again, this is super easy. And I think I said, or I started to mention, that when it came in a roll, it was not flat. And so I just went ahead and I put a dry iron to it. You do not want to starch before you cut. And the only reason is because it will shrink a little on one side of the fabric. So you don't want any shrinkage. You just want, if there's any wrinkles to it, and just take a dry iron and flatten it out. Again, layer cakes are wonderful because it gives you a sample of all the fabric line. Now, some layer cakes will have duplicates, and some layer cakes will have a really, really light fabric in it. If I'm making this, that's one of the first things I pull out. I go through it and see if there are any really, really white tone-on tones. I normally put that to the side and do not use it in the quilt, but it's your quilt and it's your choice what fabrics you want to use. So we have 18, and we are going to start, and this is called 1, 2, 3, and this is because the amount of cuts you are going to take with each section. So with section A, I am going to straighten this out as best I can, make it as even as I can. I'm going to take my ruler, and you can alter these to be any size that you want. I'm going to do some basic sizes for this quilt because it's just a little easier on my mind when I am sewing it. So sewing it, and then when I go to put it all together. So the one thing I'm going to do is I am going to take a 5 inch, I'm just cutting right down the middle, 5 inches of this 10-inch stacker, and I'm just double checking I'm 5. And I believe I need a new blade. Mhm. So let me set that aside for a minute. Okay, so we have one cut, that's number one. I am going to take the top piece, just with the very first one, and put that to the bottom. And these are going to get sewn together with a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and do it now. Now you might want to go ahead and cut every section, but for the purpose of this video, we are just going to take it in steps. So I'm going to go ahead. I am going to take my two pieces, take that 1/4 inch line, and then I am going to press it out to the dark side. So I will be right back. So I've sewed my 4 blocks together. I pressed toward the dark fabric, and I am just going to set this aside. So let me just put it here, and then I'm going to grab it and set that aside. Now you might want to split this up if you're not comfortable with cutting multiple layers of fabric. You might want to split this up into 3 and 3. I am going to just do this really nice and flat. And if it's not quite even, I don't want you to stress about it because this is going to get trimmed down to the final size of the block. Now, what we are looking for is about a 9-inch block. If you've taken a nice 1/4 inch strip seam, you should be able to get a 9-inch finished block or unfinished block. So that's down. But I'm pretty much comfortable with this. I'm going to lay it down, and I generally like to cut standing up, but we're going to just try to make this as even as possible. I am going to stay with my 5-inch cut just for the purposes of it. You can move it to 4, you can move it to 3 or 2.5, but I'm just going to stay with the 5-inch cut. It just helps me to remember. This is where number 2 comes in. We are going to take 2 cuts on this. So we are going to go just like we did with the other one. Take that. There's 1 cut. And then we're going to turn this over, and we're going to do another 5-inch cut. Again, if it's not quite even, because you have these little zigzagged edges at the end, so it doesn't always line up. And I'm going to take another 5-inch cut. So let me put this back here. And what I want to do is I want to go 1, pick that up, 1, 2, and put it towards the back. So we have 2 cuts and 2 turns. It's going to look like this. Now, what we are going to do is take this and we are going to take a 1/4 inch seam along this way. I do chain piece this. It makes it go a lot easier. So you're going to take it like this. Once that is completed, you will just fold it over and sew it to this. So I'm going to pause the video while I do that, and I will meet you back. Hey, at this point, I've sewn my pieces together. You can either iron it or you can finger press it. I'm just going to do a finger press, and I am going to sew this together. Now, it will not be even because we've taken a seam, so our 9-inch, our 5 by 10 inch strip is going to be just a little bit longer. So just go ahead and make sure that everything is nice and lined up. If you want to pin, you can, and then you're going to take your 1/4 inch strip or your 1/4 inch seam. Okay, I have sewn them all together, all the pieces together, and I gave them a good press, and I pressed it to that 5 by 10 inch. You can press whichever way you want. Sometimes the fabric has a mind of its own and it naturally wants to lay a certain way. So I'm going to put that there, and now we are on our 3rd stack. And we are going to take 3 cuts on this. And again, as I said, that if you're not comfortable cutting through multiple layers of fabric, you can go ahead and split this up into 4 layers at a time. I am just going to go ahead and lay this out to make it nice and neat. And I am just going to cut one time. So let me get my ruler. Again, I am going to cut this in half. We're making 3 cuts. I'm going to cut this in half into a 5-inch strip. This is a very forgiving pattern, so if you accidentally cut a 4-inch strip, don't throw it away and think you've messed it up. We're going to work with it. Okay, we're going to take that first one. So we had cut one. The first one we're going to turn towards us, and I am going to take a 4-inch cut. Set that aside right up there. I'm going to turn this one around, and I am going to take a 4-inch cut, and I am just going to take a 3-inch cut. And the reason why I'm doing this is so that we do not have any seams that we have to match up within the block unit itself. So let me take that down. And this is really easy, so I won't put that there the way it was. Put our block back. We took 3 cuts. on this one. It looks like this. We're going to leave that alone. We're going to take one, put it down. We're going to count two, put it on the bottom, and then we're going to count three. One, two, three. And I think one, two, three. Did I even do that right? Oh, I had one too many. So we're gonna move one down, two down, and three. So everything should look different. Then I want you to just simply flip this around, just like that. So we're gonna have our two larger ends opposing each other and our two smaller ends. I want you to sew this down, taking a 1/4 inch, these down, taking a 1/4 inch, and when you have your two halves, I want you to sew them together. And I'm going to do that now. And this quilt goes back together really, really quick. It takes a little longer when you're having to explain it on a video and stopping and starting. So it goes by really, really quick. You can actually have this basted and or sandwiched and quilted in a day. If you have a full day to give to it, it can be done. So hold on a second and I will be back. I'm going to go ahead and sew my units together. I am back. I have all my pieces stitched together. I have 8 completed blocks and I'm just going to toss this on the side, pulling one. Now, this portion is just a little important. I want you to make certain that you start with the very last block that you made. So it's the block that's going to have the most cuts in it. And we are going to see if we can get at least 9 inches from here. So if you can get 9.5, that would be great. And I'm looking for my 1/2 inch line. Let's see, let me turn this around. And that's going to be fairly pushing it for me. I could probably get 9.5 inches. But just to be safe, because I do not know how well my other blocks are, I'm going to go ahead and do a 9-inch cut. And I'm just finding that 4.5 inch line. And I'm going to square my block up. So I have my 4.5 inch line. I have enough to trim away on all sides. And I am going to make a 9-inch block. And this is probably the most tedious portion of this quilt. So you are going to go ahead and cut all your blocks into 9 inches. If you are a scrap saver because you do things, you can save those scraps. They're cute little pieces. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Quick note, if you are a starcher and you absolutely have to start, you want to go ahead and start at this point before you trim it up to 9 inches. All right, so I have trimmed everything up, all my blocks to 9 inches. And you can see all my wonderful scrap I have set on the side that I am going to keep for a project. Now, at this point, it's up to you, totally up to you. You can put it on a design wall and make a design from it. You will need 16 blocks and it will be 4 by 4. So two of these units will not be used, and you can choose to go ahead and pull it out now. I normally go ahead, pull one of those and one of these units that had multiple cuts, the ones that we took 3 cuts in. I go ahead and pull that out, so I'm only working with 16 blocks. And I want you to set that aside because you will use it, and I will share that in a bit. So now, like I said, you can go ahead, take it to your design wall, lay it out, determine a sign. What I like to do just to make it interesting and because it's fun, it's a quick quilt top. And to alleviate some of my stress, now depending on your fabric line, this would be a good I Spy quilt. It is also a good quilt that will teach your child as they grow primary colors and shapes. So I just kind of mix it all up. I'm not, they've all been ironed, and I just kind of mix it up like so. And then what I am randomly going to do is I'm going to pick 2 blocks. These 2 blocks came up, and I am randomly going to sew 2 blocks together. Now there is no seams to match, so we're just going to go ahead and sew. And when we're done, we should have 8 sets completed. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, I've sewn 2 blocks together. I've made 8 sets. And so now I am just going to so 2 of these sets together, folding it over. This is going to be the only time that you should have seams that line up. And if it's not perfect, again, this is a very forgiving quilt. So if you do not nest those seams correctly, it is okay. It will just add to the character of the quilt. And I am going to make 4 sets of these. So I'm going to go ahead, take care of that right now, and I will be back. I have sewn my pieces together, so now I have a 4 patch. And what we're left with is a giant 4 patch. So I want you to go ahead and you can sew this to this and this to this and that together, or you can flip it over, sew it this way, however you want to do it. But we're going to join it so that we're going to join this giant 4 patch. And we're almost done. So we're only talking about 3 seams left to do. And let's go ahead and get that done. And we're done. So here we have it, our baby quilt, our 1, 2, 3, and it's just made so easy, baby quilt. I did press it together. I did give it a good press. And now all you have to do is go ahead and baste it, quilt it, and bind it. Really, really easy. I do have two other videos that will be going with this this video. One is an alternate method of doing the 1, 2, 3 quilt that you may enjoy. Just a little bit more complicated, but still very beginner friendly. Additionally, if you want to make a wheelchair quilt, again, this is 35 by 35 because we had 9-inch blocks and we had to give 1-inch reduction for that seam allowance. So it's a 35-inch block. You can easily grow this quilt by using other layer cakes or bordering it. That's up to you. In this baby size quilt, you need about a yard of fabric and I would say 38 inches square of batting. Okay, but if you want to make this wheelchair quilt, remember we pulled out 2 additional blocks that we did not need because we made 18 blocks. There's 2 additional blocks. You can pull that out. Just take that seam apart right there for that 5-inch. Sew those together and then you can add an additional row to the top and it won't really matter because it will keep in theme with the quilt itself. Go ahead and sew that together and that will give you an additional, it will be about 39 inches, just a little short, or 39.5 inches. So you're just going to be just a little under that 40-inch requirement for a wheelchair quilt, which is not going to be a big issue. So that is an option if you want to use those blocks. Now we'll put those away. But I thank you. I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment. Would love to have you as a subscriber, but it is not necessary. And I thank you so much. As always, be blessed, be kind, and keep sewing. Thank you. Bye.